couple of his main points here today. First of all, he calls immigration reform amnesty, and that alienates a great deal of Hispanic voters across this country. As he talked about, Senator Cruz is of Cuban descent. He doesn't relate well to a majority of the Latino voters in this country who are Mexican American. And the reason for that is because Cubans have a special immigration status in this country. All they have to do is set foot on American land, on U.S. soil, and they are already automatically on a path to citizenship. Mexican Americans, Mexicans who come across the border, if they set foot on American soil, are sent back or detained. So that automatically is a divide among those two groups of immigrants. And Senator Cruz has been a very loud advocate, a virulent advocate against immigration reform, calls it amnesty. The other thing that he is very strong about is Obamacare. He says, as you heard, that he'll eliminate Obamacare immediately. Well, that's 16 million people, according to the White House, who now have health insurance that didn't have health insurance before Obamacare came on the roll. So that's 16 million people he's going to have to deal with and come up with a plan to cover them if Obamacare is in fact eliminated. And that is Obamacare is a huge issue in the Hispanic community as well. The two biggest issues in the Hispanic community are in fact Obamacare and immigration reform, both of which are supported largely in the Latino community. So while he may have a Latino name, he's going to do very little to help the Republican Party when it comes to the Latino vote.
So, Rick, I want to bring you in on two of those points there that Jim had just pointed out there about immigration and also about the Affordable Care Act. I want to ask you about the selection of the venue at Liberty University and the timing of it being the 5-year anniversary of the Affordable Care Act.
No mistake on either of those. First, this looked more like a religious revival, maybe a Sunday morning television sermon, a Joel Osteen type of event than a presidential announcement. And this is a critical audience for Ted Cruz. Jim is right about the broad appeal in the party toward Hispanics and the need for them to make inroads in a general election. But in a primary election, it is a much different animal. And Obamacare is a huge applause line in Republican crowds. And a hardline stance on immigration is probably where the majority of the Republican primary voters in key states are. So Ted Cruz needs to reach out to them. And in terms of this community today, this is a religious institution. He talked about turnout among evangelicals, needing to get that up. Those are his base. If he is able to corner the market on evangelicals, on Tea Partiers, a lot of overlap in those groups, then he has got a segment of the party. And his hope is that the rest of the party fragments. He is able to capture essentially the far right, the hardline right of the conservative movement, and keep them in his corner. It's no small task. His negative numbers, even among Tea Partiers, are significant. But I was struck, Dan, by the optimism in this speech. This was no fire and brimstone Ted Cruz. Imagine, he said over and over again. And I think he's got some credibility now in the movement to go positive on his vision rather than talk about what he doesn't want. He's going to be challenged on a lot of those particulars, but I think we saw a little bit of a glimpse of the type of Ted Cruz we're going to see. It's not going to be the guy who was famous for prompting the government shutdown. It's going to be a guy who offers a vision for a number of Americans, a large segment of Americans who feel like they have not been represented well in Washington in recent years.
Jim,
Dan,
you talk...
Dan, if I can just talk with Rick just a little bit about that. He's absolutely right that this was designed to get a foothold in the extreme right part of the Republican Party. The problem that Ted Cruz has is that he's not alone. In fact, right now, there's Governor Huckabee, Ben Carson, and Rick Santorum, along with Rand Paul, all going for that same segment of the right wing. That is great news for Jeb Bush, because Jeb Bush stands pretty much alone, except for Governor Christie, who's had his own problems because of scandal. Governor Jeb Bush almost stands alone as a moderate in the Republican Party, and he faces a really divided party as far as on the right side, the right wing of the party, and that's good news for Jeb Bush, and very difficult news for Ted Cruz, who has Rick points out, has very high negative numbers across the party. Because even though this was a positive speech today, you can't forget all the negative things, all the outlandish statements that Ted Cruz has made over time. In fact, in the New Yorker today on Twitter, there was a very funny but kind of hits home type of thing that's going to be out there about Ted Cruz. It says, deranged man from Canada tries to get into the White House. That's the kind of thing you're going to see because of the kind of ammunition that Ted Cruz has given his opponents over the last 4 years.
So, Jim, explain that then, from Canada, because I know you had said that Senator Cruz has Cuban descent, but he was born in Canada. Is there going to be any question then about his eligibility to run for office?
I think it's been pretty much settled that he's an American citizen. His parents were both American citizens. His mother was an American. She happened to be out of the country at the time that he was born. Most experts would say that does not eliminate him from a candidacy for presidency. In fact, all those except for Donald Trump, the birther, number one birther in the country, who has raised some objections. But most experts, people who actually know what they're talking about, say that Ted Cruz can run legally for president.
So, Rick, how exactly is Senator Cruz going to bankroll this run to the White House?
He is hoping for smaller dollar donations. He is not expecting to be a favorite of the big money crowd, although he has a significant base of donors in Texas, where he is very popular as a senator there. So he can tap those to some extent, but he's not expecting to be competitive with the Jeb Bushes of the world, even the Scott Walkers, maybe the Marco Rubios of the world. He's hoping that this is an online campaign. He often tells his supporters, text us the word Constitution to get on our list. He's hoping to get a little bit of a bump now going first. The other candidates were expecting most of the announcements, or a good portion of announcements, to happen in April. Being first in the pool, being able to scoop up some of those names, some of those donations, and to get it going. His team has always said if they could get some kind of a grassroots financing going, they could be very competitive. There's an argument for that. He has some limitations in the party that he's going to have to overcome. I would not consider him a front runner by any stretch, but I would consider him a factor. And another point I'd make is this is, as Jim said, a champion debater. You saw him the ease with which he traversed the stage today. You can imagine the glee with which he will greet the beginning of the primary debate season in August. You're talking about a debate a month. If he's up there with 10 or 11 other guys, and some women as well, he is going to be a difference maker. He is going to be someone that isn't afraid to say, call out a Governor Bush on a position on immigration, say, or education, and put his own record up against anyone else on the stage. That's where the Cruz team feels like if they can get to the debates as a credible candidate, registering enough in the polls to show up on that stage, then he can do some real damage.
So, Jim, let me ask you then, what do we see then from the Cruz campaign as trying to make that effort to appeal to the Latino voter if, in fact, he has that stance on immigration that he has?
Well, the Republican strategy on Latino voters, and I think this applies to Ted Cruz as well, is to say that immigration is not the most important issue to them, that the most important issue should be the economy, and that they're not joining in, that Hispanics are not enjoying the economy, the rebound in the economy that the rest of America is. The problem that they have is that that doesn't resonate. Mitt Romney tried the same thing. The problem is that immigration is a gateway issue to the Hispanic voter in this country. If you insult Hispanics by saying they should self-deport, or they should be arrested at the border, or their relatives should be arrested at the border, and do not have a plan for immigration reform, the rest of your message is not heard. It is a gateway issue. That's the problem Cruz had. You know, even in the Senate, where when he won in Texas, he won big. But he only got 35%, maybe less than 35% of the Hispanic vote, despite a huge victory in Texas. He does not have a majority of the Hispanic vote support in his own state. And that's because he has been such an advocate against immigration reform. He even stood with and sat next to the governor of Texas, who struck down President Obama's executive action to celebrate the fact that some 5 million Hispanics who were here and were expecting to receive protection from being deported, he celebrated the fact that was struck down. He's become an advocate already today. We're receiving emails like crazy from Hispanic groups reminding people that he is against and he wants to deport millions of immigrants who are here already and who would be protected by what's called DACA, the Dreamers Act.
So, Rick, lastly, let me ask you then about the venue, about the overall tone and the intent of this initial launch there, taking place at Liberty University. You know, presumably when candidates are making this kind of announcement, they go into friendly territory, an area that they're going to feel support, as you had pointed out, both and being able to rally the base. Did he do that, though, in the fact that you mentioned there was no fire and brimstone, and it seemed as if there was a thread of optimism, often repeating imagine?
This event, I think, looked awesome. I think that this was exactly the visuals that Ted Cruz wants. I think he'll have plenty of time to fire up his base, and you'll hear a lot more. But I think he hit a lot of the notes that the folks in that crowd and across the country evangelicals would want. One critique, there looked like there was some Rand Paul supporters who got in the background of some of the shots. I'm sure the Cruz people would like to do that over. But this, just in terms of the ease with which he worked that stage, the kind of in-the-round atmosphere, the revival type of aspect, the sermon type of feel that there was in there, that is what Ted Cruz wants to telegraph. And a lot of his strategy based on Iowa, the same kind of strategy he did door-to-door, working it in small forums in Texas, beating an establishment candidate there. They hope that it pays off, and who knows? He enters as a long shot, not a favorite, but he does have an argument, and he does have a following, and he does have a profile, and we just saw the first slivers of what that's going to mean today.
And so it officially begins. Our senior national correspondent, Jim Avila in Washington, and our political director, Rick Klein. Guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
You can keep up with the story in real time, downloading the ABC News app and starring the story for exclusive updates on the go. For now, I'm Dan Kleffler in New York.